Do you need it? Or? Okay. I am delighted today to be here with an old friend of mine, Larry Wilmore. Larry is a familiar face, I think, to millions of TV viewers. He has been an actor, a comedian, and a writer for more than 25 years. He is perhaps best known for his role as host of Comedy Central's The Nightly Show with Larry Wilmore, a show that I appeared on several occasions and enjoyed very, very much. Larry, thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure, Bernie. Thanks for having me. So I have a really, really big treat, and I'm so honored and happy that this gentleman has agreed to be on my flagship broadcast of my podcast. He's the honorable senator from Vermont. You know him as the bird catcher himself. The man so many people were rooting for president, and he's here in person, Mr. Bernie Sanders. Hello, Bernie.
Larry, great to be with you.
It's so nice to be with you, Bernie. Bernie, you were so kind appearing on my show several times. We had so much fun. It felt like such a special time back then, too, and what was going on. I think it was 2 years ago when you actually announced you were going to run. 2 years has passed since then. I want to go back to that feeling just a bit. When you first decided to run, in that moment, what were you really trying to do? Were you trying to get a message out? Did you think you had a realistic chance of winning at that time when you ran? Like, what was in your mind at that point?
What was in my mind at that particular moment, and I was running for the Democratic nomination,
right,
was that I thought it was absolutely imperative that a progressive voice be heard. That I believed then and I believe now there was an enormous amount of pain in this country, and that if a strong progressive was not in the race, many, many very important issues would not see the light of day. That's why I initially got in.
Did you have a feeling that the Obama administration was a progressive administration or a liberal administration? What was your take on that?
It's hard to put a word on it. Barack Obama is a personal friend of mine, is somebody I have an enormous amount of respect for. Given the kinds of obstructionism, unprecedented obstructionism that Republicans threw at him, he accomplished a hell of a lot. And he also conducted his presidency with his entire family, with Michelle and their kids, with incredible dignity and grace. And that is something, especially given today, that we appreciate. Is Obama's politics my politics? No. Did we disagree on a number of issues? We sure did. I think at the end of the day, what happened, and one of the reasons that Trump ended up winning, is no debate that we made real economic progress under Obama. No question about it. Unemployment went down. The deficit went down. We overcame the great financial crisis that he inherited. But what was not
the macroeconomic recovery was not a debate.
Right. Among anybody who's not,
right.
partisan crazy. Right.
Exactly.
Right. But in the midst of that, Larry, there were a lot of terrible things that were going on in the economy that Obama was not talking about, Congress was not talking about.
Why do you think that was? Why do you think that happened?
That is a very profound question. Who gives a damn that kids in inner cities today have unemployment rates of 20, 30%?
Right.
Who cares that in rural areas in West Virginia, people are now dying at a younger age than their parents? Who gives a damn that moms in L.A. or New York City or Vermont can't afford to send their kids to college? Who cares a damn about that? They don't contribute large amounts of money into political campaigns, just ordinary people trying to survive. Who cares about them? And Obama did not talk enough about those issues, okay? And Trump picked up, and he said, you know what? I feel your pain. The establishment is ignoring you. I, Donald Trump, of all people, am going to take on the establishment. Well, he lied, of course.
Yeah.
But that was his message.
I think it was part of his message. I think it was more your message, if I may. I think a lot of Trump's message was protectionism, and I mean, he came out of the box talking about building a wall. That was the thing that got the fervor around Trump in the beginning. He did talk about trade, I think, later on, but his message was more about a globalism economy. But he just connected to a lot of those people.
Well, I think you're converging. There are two issues here.
Yeah.
One of them is the xenophobia and the racism.
Right.
which clearly was an important part.
Yes, he came out of the box with that.
Absolutely. Well, it was before he came out of the
Yes,
box. So remember,
exactly.
this was a guy who years ago
Believe me, I remember.
led the so-called birther movement,
Yes.
which was not 99% racist, but 100% racist against the first African-American president we had.
Yes, the delegitimization of it, I call
Exactly.
it. Right.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It's not that Obama is a bad president. He's an
Right.
illegal president, a disgusting thing to say.
Correct.
All right, and that's was even before he announced. And then
Yes.
Latinos are all rapists and criminals. We know that, and Muslims are all terrorists. And this is old-fashioned racism, xenophobia. It's a tried and true method of demagogues trying to divide people up.
Well, the Trump thing actually, to me, is a couple of layers deeper than that, because it's not really, the way that I heard it, it wasn't so much saying it about Mexicans and Muslims. It was putting it on immigrants. It was saying we can't trust people coming into our country. It was making a them versus us. And it was dividing classes of immigrants, too. Like, I've heard Ann Coulter talk about this. I think Trump jumped on Ann Coulter's bandwagon, where they talk about only a certain class of immigrants should be allowed into this country. And I think a lot of Trump's message was exactly that. And part of that class they don't want in are some of these brown people that are doing the raping and all that stuff, you know. But I want to know, okay, when I was growing up, Bernie, I always felt the Democratic Party was the party of the people.
Where'd you grow up, Larry?
I grew up in California. Yeah. My parents are from Chicago, very political town, and a very racially divisive city to grow up in.
I went to school at the University of,
So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do,
you know?
very much so.
I think even King mentioned it was one of the most racially charged places he had ever been in, including Alabama. But I grew up very politically aware from my parents. They weren't really activists or that type of thing, but it was in the air, right? But the Democratic Party, to me, seemed to represent the party of the people during that time. Why did that leave them?
Democratic Party, has a crazy history, like the Republicans do. Let's not forget that under FDR and Truman, the Democratic Party was successfully nationally, while within its folds was the incredible racism of the South. All right, the
Correct.
Dixiecrats. Okay, so
that's
not,
exactly
so you had
right.
some of the most progressive people in the country and some of the most reactionary people in the country.
Yes, and let's not forget that Republicans, the progressive movement was in the Republican Party as well.
Absolutely.
Teddy Roosevelt was a progressive.
That's right.
A lot of those policies were adopted by FDR and the New Deal.
Right.
Yeah.
So, there's been a lot of transformation
Right.
of politics to where we are today. What happened, I think, Larry, is that over the years, you're quite right, though. I think if you, in 1938, 1940, stopped somebody on the street and said, tell me which political party is the party of the working class of this country, which party is the party of big money,
Right.
it would have been pretty clear.
Easy answer, right?
Very easy answer.
Yes.
Today, that's not the answer. You
Yeah.
stop those people, no one's quite sure. They think both parties are on the take. Both parties are dominated by big money. And I think what happened to the Democrats, I don't know exactly when, late 60s, 70s maybe I'm off by some years,
Yeah.
they began to understand that the easy way to raise money was to go to corporate America.
Yes.
Okay? And once you go to Wall Street and you go to corporate America and you take their money, eventually their ideology, that ideology begins to seep into your politics. And I think you saw that certainly in the Clinton administration, Bill Clinton's administration.
And when you say their ideology, what specifically are you talking about?
More centrist political approach, less emphasis on the needs of working people, trying to balance, for example, the needs of Wall Street. You'll remember during the Clinton administration, they deregulated Wall Street.
Yes.
It wasn't George Bush who did it. It was Bill Clinton who did it. It was Robert Rubin, who was his Secretary of Treasury. This was Wall Street. This was Wall Street's message.
Right. And we had just had a crash in 1987.
That's right. That's right.
I remember the whole savings and loan debacle that people had forgotten about so quickly.
Which now seems nickel and dime,
yes,
right?
It was compared to the credit default swaps of the
Exactly.
odds. Yeah.
Exactly. So you had that. You had a trade policy. Corporate America said, hey, why do I want to pay workers in America a good wage? I can move to Mexico, then to China.
Right.
Let's do that. So you had, policies that reflected what Wall Street and the big money interest wanted. And I think in that process, the soul of the Democratic Party was lost. Larry, my philosophy is, and I know not everybody agrees with me, but do you remember that old Woody Guthrie song of Which Side Are You On?
Sure.
Remember that?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what, in politics, you got to make a decision.
Yes. Where are you going to stand? Yeah.
Where are you going to stand? Are you going to stand with working people who are struggling? You're going to stand with the big money interests? You can't be in both camps.
Now, it seems that the Democrats feel that they can, because there certainly has been both a corporatist type of agenda along with, and a lot of people have criticized the Democrats for this, along with what people call identity politics. And it feels like identity politics has taken over from working class politics. Is that fair?
I think it is. I think it is. As a generalization, I think it is.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, okay, are we going to, it should go without saying, not a debate, are we going to fight racism on all fronts? Of course.
Of course.
Sexism, homophobia, that's a given.
Yes, let's hope
forget
so.
that. All right, now let's get to the real issue. All right, and let's get to the heart and soul of this thing. Is that are we a party which protects black workers and Latino workers and white workers and Asian American workers and Native American workers, or are we a party which is very sympathetic to the needs of the 1% and the billionaire class and corporate America? That is the issue, okay? And I think the Democratic Party has got to make it clear that at a time when the middle class has been shrinking for 40 years, there has been a massive transfer of wealth from working families to the top 1/10 of 1%. I think the Democratic Party says we are on the side of working families. We're going to take on Wall Street, take on big money.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to do.
It almost seems like there's been almost a fetishing of the Dow Jones over the last 30 years, you know. Like we're so concerned with that number as if it means anything, where it really only represents, you know, profits, corporate profits, trade, and that sort of thing. But it doesn't represent what workers are actually making, how people's lives are actually being affected.
Do you know Jim Hightower by any chance?
No, I don't know Jim.
Jim is an old friend of mine from Texas, populist. And he writes books. He's a comedian. Jim says, I'm not worried about the Dow Jones. I'm worried about the Doug Jones.
Yes.
What's happening to Doug?
Exactly.
He's working at some factory. What's happening
But
to him?
I think we forgot about that. I mean, it seems like I actually talked to President Clinton about this a couple of years ago. I was doing something for the Global Clinton Initiative, interviewing him. And he felt that a lot of corporations were rewarding shareholders more than their workers now. Like that was the biggest change, you know, which is it's more about making them happy than making your workers happy and growing your businesses that way, you know. So is the Democratic Party now, do you think do you think it is a progressive party right now, or
The answer is, let me give you an unequivocal yes and no.
Okay.
You got to
All right.
All right. I helped write, along with Secretary Clinton, what is the most progressive party platform in the history of American politics.
For this past election.
Yes.
Right.
And that is officially now where the Democratic Party stands. It stands for a $15 an hour minimum wage. It stands for moving to universal health care, guaranteeing health care to all people. It stands for breaking up the largest Wall Street banks. It stands for pay equity for women, very pro-choice platform. It stands for creating millions of jobs, rebuilding our infrastructure. You read that, it is a very, very progressive document. It stands for making public colleges and universities tuition-free, etc. So in that sense, we have moved. And I think there is a movement in that direction. On the other hand, I would not be honest with you in telling you that there is an element of the Democratic establishment who may give lip service to those ideas, but that's not what is in their really heart of hearts.
It seems like the biggest enemy of the progressive movement nowadays may be the Democratic Party.
Well,
the biggest obstacle.
That may be, in the sense.
I mean, did you see the event with Dianne Feinstein recently in
I did. I
San
heard
Francisco?
about it. I didn't see it.
She got a lot of shade from that audience. They were very upset with her. They were. It almost seemed like there were two eras that were speaking to each other. You know, there was this era of the Democratic past or current, which a lot of people think is in the past, which fair or not fair, I don't know. And what clearly represented the future of the Democratic Party, or what people would like the future to be, which is that progressive part of it.
That's a very good point, Larry. I mean, one of the things that I'm very proud of.
Oh, and the other thing is, she was not having it, by the way, either. Like, she's like, sorry, that's how you feel, but that's not how it is.
Well, One of the things that I'm proud of is that during my campaign, and if you had asked me way back when, I would never have predicted this. I think I didn't know what the word millennial meant. Just go out and do your thing, right? I didn't say anything different than I've been saying for 40 years.
Yes, you've been very consistent on this message. That's for
boringly consistent.
Yeah.
But it turns out that there are a lot of young people, and I'm being generous, young is 40 or under at least.
Yeah. Or 60 and under.
There you go.
Let's keep it real, Bernie.
That's right. Youth is, what do they say? It's what's in your heart and
Yes.
not your chronology here. Who really have a very different vision for where this country should go than the establishment does.
Right.
Who are prepared to think big. And I got to tell you something, Larry, and I always think about this with a smile on my face. I ran all over this country. We ended up speaking to like 1.4 million people in rallies, some very large, some not so large. And I remember being out in the fields and agricultural areas in California talking to 5 o'clock in the evening, 10,000 people, young people, black, Latino, white kids, working class people. It was so beautiful. You looked in front of you, so my God, this is a beautiful country. There are beautiful, beautiful people in it who dream big, who really...
Very bold.
And by the way, it is the least prejudiced generation in the history of this country. They're beyond all that crap that our parents dealt with. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And they want this country. They ask themselves, why are we the only nation not to guarantee health care to all people?
Yeah.
Why do we accept this level of income and wealth inequality? Why do we still have the kind of sexism and racism that we have? And in that sense, they are ahead of the Democratic Party. Absolutely.
Right. So now you have a book coming out, and I think you have the word revolution in your book, right? A lot of people saw what you were doing as revolutionary, part of a revolt, if you will. But does the Trump election, do you think it suggests we may be on the brink of a different type of revolution? I mean, when you think of Brexit, when you think of what may be happening in France even right now, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I feel like we could go either way in the world right now, not just this country, but in the world. We're at one of those moments that people will look back on and say that was a key moment.
Larry, I think you're right. And that's why I tell everybody, and I say it again, this is I go use the word pivotal moment in not only in American history, but in world history.
Yeah.
And if people say they're distressed or they're depressed or they're in despair, sorry, you don't have the time for that. This is not about you. It's about your children. In terms of climate change, it's about the future of this planet. Here is what I believe. I believe that Trump's views, and if you forget his rhetoric and his bombacity, forget all that stuff.
Do I have to forget his tweets too?
Yeah, forget his tweets.
All right.
Just look at what he wants to do. And here's the thing. He campaigned. You remember they said, I'm a different type. Now, this is really appealing.
Right.
Democratic Party is not terribly popular. So he goes out, and the Republican Party is even less popular. He says, I'm different. Hey, I'm not your... He specifically said, I'm not like Paul Ryan. I'm not like these old Republicans. I'm not going to cut your Social Security and your Medicare and your Medicaid. I'm going to take on the establishment. I saw an ad of his. I don't know if you recall it.
That's right. He actually ran from the left.
Jesus. At the end of the campaign, 90% of I'm taking on the global establishment.
He actually got this is one of the most amazing things. He actually got the Republicans to admit that it was Hillary Clinton who started the Iraq War. I mean, that was you talking about your head exploding. People were blaming her for the Iraq War and not the Bush administration that they were all on board with at the
Larry,
time.
here's the point. That, of course, absolutely.
That's crazy.
That is crazy. But if you look at his ad, you say, is this guy a communist? Socialist? What is he? He's taking on the global pictures of Wall Street.
Right.
All right. This is a left perspective.
Yes, correct.
Something most Democrats wouldn't go, now, I'm going to take them all on. Wall Street has ripped you off. Drug companies have ripped you off. Well, he's right.
Yeah.
Turned out, of course, total phony and a total liar. He never meant anything that he said.
Yeah.
So he tells us he's going to take on Wall Street, and he's hired former president of Goldman Sachs to be his chief economic advisor. Half of Goldman Sachs now works for him. He's going to try to throw 24 million people off of health insurance after telling us he's going to provide health care for everybody. My point is, what he did is touched a nerve, and we have to acknowledge that nerve. People are not happy with the Democrats. They certainly hate corporate America. They hate Wall Street. He said, I'm going to take them on. Obama didn't take them on.
Yeah.
I am going to take them on. People voted for him. Now, he lied.
Right.
That's the way it is. And our job is to bring people together at the grassroots level to stand up not only in opposition to Trump, but for a progressive agenda. Truth is, his views, throwing millions of people off of health insurance, giving huge tax breaks to billionaires, not acknowledging the reality of climate change, taking away a woman's right to choose. You know what? Those are not popular views. They are a distinct minority of the American people. Our views, raising the minimum wage, pay equity for women, creating millions of jobs, taking on the drug companies, taking on Wall Street, those are the popular views. We've got to bring our people together around that agenda.
Why do you think so many people compared you to Trump? You know, they use this word populist to describe you both, which, you know, I told you my view on this. I don't even think you guys are close, you know, in terms.
Well, I think
you were both outside of the system.
Yeah, I think what it was meant, anti-establishment. All right, now you've asked me questions. Can I ask you a few questions?
Sure.
All right. So, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you
for all of your work. And I know that what you have tried to do and are doing today is you don't see yourself just as a quote-unquote entertainer. As handsome as you are.
Debonair is the word I prefer to use.
As a sex symbol for millions.
Glad you said it first.
No, and you understand that as somebody who has millions of followers, you're trying to use, that recognition to talk about important issues.
Sure.
Give me your sense, because you've been around corporate media, one as a writer, actor, TV host for a long time. Tell us from behind the scenes, what makes them tick? Why are certain things get on the air and other things don't get on the air?
Yeah.
What can you tell us about corporate America?
Well, of course, I come from the content creation part of it, even though people associate me with fake news, I'm not a journalist or that type of thing. I've created comedies and that sort of thing, And the networks over the years have become more corporate and more corporate. And there's really only like 5 companies that are the big companies that own almost all of media right now.
And by the way, that's just not nationally. That's internationally almost as well. Is that not true?
Yes, there's a few more, but yes, right. like a 19th Century Fox is what I call Fox. Sorry, who are applauding themselves for coming into the 20th century right now. Rupert Murdoch has holdings all over the world, as well as the newspapers and all that type of stuff. Many times there's such an attention to bottom line, and to there was this whole thing called vertical integration, which I called vertical segregation at the time, where you don't even sell things to other entities anymore. You hoard it yourself, and distribute it yourself. And companies are owning their own means of producing and all that type of stuff.
Say a word on that, and I'm sure.
Sure.
Now, Disney would be a good example of that.
Sure. Disney's the company that I work for, of course. And
I'm trying to get you fired now. So tell me something about Disney.
Well, Disney owns a lot of properties. ABC is owned by Disney. They used to be owned by Cap Cities and other companies and that sort of thing. But Disney is a very large company, and one of its properties is ABC Entertainment. Right. ABC Entertainment has to provide a service for Disney. And Disney's bottom line isn't just ABC. It's also things like ESPN, it's Disneyland, it's Marvel Comics, which they own, and they have a huge film franchise, Pixar. They have all kinds of entities all over. And sometimes this isn't necessarily the case with Disney, but sometimes when you're working for a corporation, you have to be part of that corporate identity and that sort of thing, But in terms of putting content on the air, one of the biggest obstacles over the years, and this is not necessarily the case at Disney, but is getting television to be the leader in something rather than the follower, and that's why it's always hard to put new things on and to have, like when Roots came on the air, it was a revelation because TV didn't do that. Mm-hmm. Like films did that, literature does that. Art sometimes is 100 years ahead of its time. TV usually follows culture. It rarely leads the culture, in certain instances it can, and I'm speaking primarily of television because what I worked in. So anytime you're trying to push the culture forward, you're going to be met with resistance.
They're worried about a backlash. And
well, the reason why is because most of television's advertiser supported. And if you're going to feel like you're a threat to the advertisers, well, you're not going to be around very long. One of the biggest examples are the Smothers Brothers that were on in the 60s. And these were two very likable guys, didn't get more white bread than Tom and Dick Smothers, until they started getting political. And it was at a time when they were actually reflecting the times. They weren't even ahead of their time.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest about that. It wasn't like it was the 50s and they were doing that comedy. This was the 60s. People were already marching in the streets and those sorts of things. Malcolm X had already been shot, When this was going down, I think King and Kennedy were assassinated in 68, So the Smothers Brothers, if anything, were reflecting their times. And they weren't allowed to do that. So that's how cautious television can be.
So if you did, or somebody gets up on ABC or CBS,
yes,
says, you know what, we as a nation have got to deal with the moral inequities of top 10% owning more wealth than the bottom 90%. We got kids who are hungry, and yet you got these billionaires with their yachts and their jet planes. How long would that show last? Do you think? Or am I wrong on that?
Well, here's where you are wrong, Bernie, is that where entertainment is different than anything else is the only color that really matters in entertainment is green. Right. It really is. Right. They really don't care what the message is.
Is that right?
Oh, completely. The message is green. If green is coming in, what did you say about the billionaires? You slam them as much as you want. If you're giving us green, we are happy with you. Greed rules the day in television, which can work for you and against you. It's fear and greed that rule it. But there's so many outlets for distribution now. You can pick up a camera and go on YouTube, and you can become a star. So there aren't as many kingmakers as they used to be. There aren't as many guardians of content anymore. So now I think networks and your traditional entities have to be more free in letting people do things now because there's too much competition, Bernie. So I think with certain exceptions, it's a little freer to get your voice out there. Not necessarily in the established corporate media all the time, but it doesn't matter because a lot of people are looking at you on Facebook Live sometimes.
All right, let me ask you, and you may not be, an expert on this, but my understanding is that...
Well, we'll just see about that.
My understanding is that the folks who watch TV now or get their news from TV are getting older and older.
Yes.
And Fox is like 100.
That watch news?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 103 years of age or something.
Yes. Fox and Friends, I think, is 80s. Yeah.
Is that true?
No, I'm just kidding.
No, but it is pretty, it's surprisingly for all the networks.
Yes.
I think Fox seems to be higher than others. And what is the future of television? You're doing now a podcast, for example.
Right.
And podcasts are gaining a lot of popularity.
Yes.
Talk about the transition of television and the revolution that we're seeing in internet media.
Well, entertainment has gone over different revolutions over time. I mean, 100 years ago, film was the newest medium that was taking over. At the same time, radio came out, two very different mediums. Film was primarily a medium that chose to entertain visually with stories and all this stuff, and its main purpose was to entertain. Whereas radio, when it came out, even though it had entertainment and news, its main purpose was to sell soap. Hence the name soap opera.
Right.
It was to sell you something. Film at the time was to sell you the entertainment itself, whereas radio was a form for another purpose.
Right. You walked into a theater, you paid money, and you were entertained.
It was a direct transaction.
Right.
Whereas radio was a separate transaction that was happening. There was actually something else going on.
Right.
And that's actually been a part of media that a lot of people never quite understood, that TV has always been the medium that was there to sell you something. Not just
programming surrounded the advertisements.
That's exactly right, And that's changing now because people that's falling down. The fact that you can get on Instagram and tell a story and do these things millennials are very guarded about being sold something now. Everybody wants something for free now. Look what happened with music and Napster, and how it broke apart the music business in many ways. Who buys albums anymore, right? Unless you're very popular. But so media is fracturing now in ways that are economically based, especially for the big companies in terms of being able to use advertisers in the same way. That's changing in a big way. The way television occurs is changing in a big way. Like YouTube is coming out with a channel they announced today, where you can just watch all your content on a phone. It's more mobile now, so the idea of TV is even an antiquated idea. What it is called now is just content. You're just watching something, And I'm watching Bernie Sanders. Is that
and
a
you
show?
can watch it at any time, not at 8 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah, you watch it when you want to watch it. It's a la carte. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's more personal now is the biggest change. Yeah. I wanted to get all historical on you, though, for a second.
No, I mean, it is really very interesting, and it's kind of revolutionary what's happening.
It is. One of the things that is changing, too, is that because it's so free, you can broadcast anything. Movements that are happening around the world can be broadcast instantly. They don't need a news division to do it,
That's right.
You can that's why a lot of, like on my show, we covered a lot of racial events that were happening, of course, in the country. And a lot of people thought, are more of these things happening now? No, more people were filming them now. We were becoming more aware of them now, things like police brutality and those sorts of issues, And so the citizen journalist and the citizen director, are going to become more important, I think, in the years to come.
Now, the negative of all that is you have some people out there who lie all the time.
Correct. That's where you get your fake news, and that sort of thing, Yeah, I mean, there was a good reason. The people that were the guardians of the content, there was a weeding out of the bad, and you had to really be good to get through that process. So the people that made it through were very polished, and you had to up your game, so to speak. It's almost in any field, So when it's wide open like that, it's harder to know, I mean, what you're looking at, if it's any good or
if it's honest,
if you can trust it, or
right.
whatever. Let me ask you a question on that. Talking about fake news and with all the partisan squabbling that's going on and people feeling like they don't know who to trust, who do you think we can turn to trust? That's
a great question, Larry. And obviously, if you talk to some of my colleagues down the hall, they will give you, other folks. In fact, this is how crazy. Let me give you an answer and show you how crazy the situation is. There was a congressman a couple of months ago, conservative Republican congressman, who said, the situation is so bad with regard to fake news. I'm paraphrasing him.
Yeah.
The only person I think you can trust to get the truth is Donald Trump. You got it?
Oh, my God.
That's true. This is what a United States congressman said. That's how
really?
Crazy. Yeah. So, I read a lot, and, you read through the traditional people, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal even I read, and I go around to the progressive media. But I think your question is a profound one. If you're young and you're not political,
where do you look?
Go? You go to Breitbart News, you go to Fox News.
Yeah.
And I would say that, what I learned when I was a kid, Larry, I don't know, and I remember this profoundly, and I don't know when, you became aware of these things. When I was a kid, and not that we were not particularly political, but you would argue with your friends about something.
Sure.
I said, no, I saw it in the newspaper.
Yes.
Did you ever say that?
Yeah,
and by definition, if it was in the newspaper, it was true.
Yes.
It was in the news.
Yeah.
And then
Bob Saget had a joke about that. He says, no, really, I read that. No, really, I wrote it down and then I read it. He goes, I believe everything I read.
Yeah. But, when you're a kid, was that your...
Sure, everybody said that. Yeah.
If it's in the newspaper, it must be true.
It has to be, yeah.
And then when I was in college, I started reading. Then I caught on that there are newspapers with different perspectives.
And agendas.
Yes. Oh, my God. So an incident is reported differently on Fox News than it will be in Common Dreams or an alternate or some progressive outlet.
Right.
Okay. And I would say to the young people who are just getting involved, number one, open your eyes and look around you. Don't let any media tell you what reality is. What is the reality of your life?
Agreed.
Number two, look internationally. Many of the ideas that I talked about, people say, oh, it's revolutionary, it's radical. Duh. We are the only major country not to guarantee health care at all.
Yeah.
I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. What I want is what happens in Canada.
Right.
Sounds so revolutionary. It's not Che Guevara running Canada, They had a conservative prime minister for a number of years.
Right.
So, look around what's going around in the rest of the world.
Right.
All right. Germany, how much it costs to go to college? It's free. Oh, my God, I didn't know that. Wow, wow. Okay, so...
You have to eat a lot of schnitzel to do that. That's the downside.
Drives up their healthcare
Yes.
costs. All right, and number two, trust your own observations. Then read the right-wing media.
I think you should read it all.
Yes.
I feel you have to get both perspectives. You have to know what people are saying on both sides and make up your own mind.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what is fascinating and intellectually really interesting is how do they watch how they present things? What are they leaving out?
Right.
Both
Yes.
on the left.
What are they leaving out? That is fantastic. What are they leaving out?
Which is more important than what they're putting in.
Yes.
The truth is, I learned a long time ago, somebody told me this. They said, it's not the answer that you give. It's the questions that you ask.
Yes. As a Catholic, we talked about the sin of commission and the sin of omission. Sometimes it's what you don't do.
Exactly.
It's when you don't show up sometimes is a much worse thing.
That's exactly right.
Than what you did.
That's exactly right.
Let me just say this, Bernie, last thing. If we were to imagine the Trump administration as like United Airlines, okay, and the Constitution is that passenger who was pulled off, right, who was dragged off the plane, how do we save that passenger? Because a lot of people believe the Constitution is in a lot of trouble right now.
Yes,
when I hear threats about libel laws,
that's right.
Threats about journalists and that type of thing.
Absolutely. This is, he starts off.
I'm saying it as a joke, but I'm serious about this.
Well, you should be. It's terrible. Look, when you start off by, one of the dangers of Trumpism is we begin to accept this thing as normal. You have a president of the United States who now tells us that the New York Times, the Washington Post, all of the newspapers, all of the networks are lying.
So dangerous. He's an authority figure, and he says that. That's one of the most irresponsible things.
It's not irresponsible, Larry. That's not the right word.
Yes, you're correct.
Okay.
Of
course it's
correct.
Irresponsible.
Yes.
But what is he trying to do?
Yeah.
What he's trying to do is if there's an article in the New York Times, hypothetically, saying that his companies are making money as a result of his policies. Don't believe that. That's the New York Times. You know that they lie all the time. Right. So what you do is you destroy people's confidence in all of the institutions.
That's exactly right.
And then who is the only person that we can have confidence in? Oh, my God, it's not the media. It's not the judiciary, is it? It's not elected officials in the Congress. No. It's one person who, thank God, is sitting there strong and proud and protecting us. And that is Donald Trump. That is what authoritarianism is all about. So you're right.
So you're going to believe me or your lying eyes.
That's right. So, all right, we covered a bit of ground.
I think we did. Can I ask you one last question?
Yeah.
How old are you now, Bernie?
Good question. 75.
You're 75.
I'm going to be 76.
Where are we a Bernie Sanders from now? Where's America a Bernie Sanders from now?
Well, I am, look.
What is our future, Bernie? Are you looking optimistic or pessimistic or cautious?
Well, I think you raised this issue. This is a strange moment in American history, and I'm both, for all of the reasons that we've just talked about, obviously very, very, very concerned about Trump's policies and his ideology and the way he performs as president and his consistent lying. We didn't touch upon that. He lies all the time.
He's brought casual lying to an art form.
Right.
I mean, he lies more than a 5-year-old who broke the vase and
That brings back a memory, Larry.
That old Richard Pryor too.
I think I was 8 years old.
Okay, what happened was, Larry,
I'm
going to tell you, okay?
That's funny. You mentioned that. Actually happened in my house. I broke a damn vase. Yeah. So that's the very bad news. The good news is that we are seeing in one form and another a lot of people standing up and fighting back and saying, you know what, I'd better get involved in the political process because this is not the kind of country I want for my kids.
All right. Bernie Sanders. I don't know if you're officially part of the resistance, Bernie, but I'm part of the Sanders movement. That's what I am.
Hey, Larry, thank you so much. Great to be with you.
Thank you, Bernie.